Good morning. I heard a joke a while back, and maybe some of you have heard it, of Moses coming down off of Mount Sinai. He's got 2 tablets of stone in his hand. He's got the 10 commandments written by God on those stones. He gathers the people together at the foot of Mount Sinai, calls for silence, and he tells the people, God has given me commandments that define how we live as his people. And I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is I got him down to 10. The bad news is adultery's still in there. I heard a little chuckling out there. It might be a little bit uncomfortable to chuckle at something like that in church, though, right? But why is this even funny at all? There's a science of humor. I don't know if you know that, and I was studying that a little bit this week, and the science of humor says that one of the reasons why we laugh at a joke is because we find a sense of reality in it. It's real to us. We can relate, and we struggle with adultery, all of us, don't we? As we talk about adultery, I could talk about a lot of different things. I feel like telling Pastor Dave, thanks a lot, I get the sex sermon again. We could talk about pornography and how it degrades a person and how it leads a person astray in their relationship with God and their concept of godly sexuality. But not only that, but it affects our society. I could talk about the pain and the suffering that infidelity in the marriage causes to both the spouses, but not only to them, but the whole family. I could talk about how our society is going down, losing its moral compass because of the shows that we watch and the magazine covers that we see. I could talk about the fact that our society is so politically charged when we bring up certain aspects of human sexuality in this politically correct world that we can't even talk about it without getting into an argument. I could talk about a lot of things today. But today I'd like to approach this from a little bit different perspective that maybe all of us can understand and relate to, no matter what's going on in our life. Jesus said to the Pharisees one day, he said, "You have heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I'm saying to you that if a man looks lustfully upon a woman, if he looks upon a woman with lustful intent, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart." What Jesus is saying is that all of us struggle with adultery. If a man looks at a woman or a woman looks at a man, if we look at another person with lustful intent, undressing them in our mind, we're guilty of adultery. And we struggle, don't we? Now, why is that? Well, I'd like you to consider something with me for a second. Have you ever thought what it must have been like for Adam to look at Eve for the very first time in the Garden of Eden? He's in this deep sleep that God had placed him into. He wakes up, stretches, yawns, rubs his eyes, and he looks up, and there standing before him is the most gorgeous thing he's ever seen, a woman. I kind of wonder if he didn't close his eyes again and rub them again, thinking, Lord, if this is a dream, I never want to wake up. You see, God made us to be sexually attracted, physically attracted to somebody of the opposite gender. It's a gift from God. Sex inside the context of marriage is a gift. Now, parents, I want to put a little disclaimer in here because we're talking about adultery here, and I'm suspecting that maybe some of you might have some conversations with your children at home this afternoon. And I hope you do. But I have to talk about this plainly. The problem is that while God gives us this gift of being sexually or physically attracted to the opposite gender, sin comes into this whole equation. And then all of a sudden, we have a problem. Everything is turned upside down. And so God has to give us some commandments. Some commandments to show us what it looks like to live in the relationships that he had originally intended in the Garden of Eden. You see, Jesus told us that all of the commandments are summed up in one word. That word is love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. You see, you and I were designed for love. We were designed to love and to be loved. But when sin enters in the equation, then all of a sudden we have this struggle inside of us. Because we have this deep need to be loved. And as we do that, then all of a sudden we struggle with this whole idea of being loved, and we start looking for love. God designed us to be in a loving relationship between God and us, a vertical relationship. And He also placed us in this world to be in a horizontal relationship with the world around us, particularly with other human beings. And did you notice in the Garden of Eden, the very first human relationship that He talks about is the one between a man and a woman in the marriage relationship? And so we have this need. And we want to fill that need to be loved. But the problem is we start doing what the song title suggests. We start looking for love in all the wrong places. And we start looking to romance as being the solution. Now, to illustrate this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you to walk through a Bible story with us. So I'm going to ask for a couple things to be done. Could we turn up the lights so that people can read? I'd like you to pick up the pew Bible in front of you in the pew rack, all right? And what I'd like to ask you to do is turn to page 30, to Genesis chapter 29. We're going to be reading through verses 15 and following, all right? So page 30. And as you're looking up Genesis 29, let me set the story for you. This story is about a guy by the name of Jacob. And Jacob grew up in a dysfunctional family. It started right at the beginning when he was born. You see, Jacob was born a twin. His brother's name was Esau. Esau was older. He was born first, just by moments. And as Esau came out of the womb, Jacob's hand was clasped to the foot, to the heel of his brother Esau, like trying to draw him back into the womb. It was almost like Jacob, as an infant, was trying to be born first. And that defined their relationship. Jacob means to grab the heel. It means almost to cheat Esau. It's like he was trying to pull him back in so he could be born first, so he could get the birthright, he could get the blessing. And later on, as they grew older, Esau was a hunter. Jacob was a little bit more domesticated and stayed home. And while Esau was gone, he came back from this hunting trip famished. And so, connivingly, deceitfully, Jacob tried to convince his brother to sell his birthright, his double portion, because he was the older, the double portion of the inheritance, to sell it to him, Jacob, for a bowl of red bean soup. And Esau fell for it. Then later on, when Isaac got older and was blind and was getting close to his death time, the time to die, all of a sudden, Jacob decided he was going to try to go and deceive his father. Taking advantage of his blindness, he goes and disguises himself, and he gets Isaac to give him the blessing that belonged to the oldest child. So when Esau came home from another hunting trip and he found out that Jacob had not only taken his birthright from him, but now had stolen the blessing from him, Esau decided in his heart that he was going to kill Jacob once his father was dead and properly buried. Rebekah, their mother, got wind of this. Part of the family dysfunction was that Esau was favored by the father, Isaac, and Jacob was favored by the mother, Rebekah. So Rebekah found out that Esau was going to kill her son, her favorite. She went to Isaac and convinced him that maybe Jacob should go and live with her brother in a faraway land. And so we see Jacob leaving his home completely empty, knowing that his father loved his brother more, knowing that his brother wanted him dead, and had no love for him whatsoever, knowing that he had to say goodbye to his mom, probably forever. And he's empty, needing love. And he travels to Haran, and he finds Laban, and he goes to work for him. And that leads us to chapter 29 of Genesis, verse 15. Follow along with me. Jacob goes to work for Laban. And then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any of other men. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Now it's interesting to note that, Jacob goes to work for his uncle Laban. And Uncle Laban says, let's sit down at the negotiating table and let's talk about what your wages should be. And as they sit down, Jacob could only think of one thing. He didn't use the currency of the day, asking for a portion of the flocks that would be born. He didn't ask for a portion of the land that Laban was using for his enterprise. Rather, he said, "I will work 7 years for you for the hand of your daughter." 7 years. Now, the dowry of the day, the price of a bride, was about 35 shekels. A year's salary was about 18 shekels. So instead of offering 2 years' worth of wages, he was offering 7 years' worth of service. 3.5 times the cost it would normally cost him for the hand of a woman to be married to him. Why? We're told because he loved Rachel. Now, what kind of love was this? Did you hear the descriptions about the 2 girls? Rachel was attractive in form and appearance. She had the body of a model. She was easy to look at, very easy to look at. You can imagine what Jacob was thinking inside of her heart and what kind of love he must have had for her. Conversely, we hear that Leah she had weak eyes. Now, we don't know exactly what that means, but it's in the same framework, comparison to the beauty of Rachel. So what we get is the insinuation that Leah was not so easy to look at. 7 years is up. And all of a sudden we get another idea, another glimpse of the heart of Jacob. Look at verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife that I may go into her." Folks, this is about as X-rated as it gets in the Bible. What kind of love did Jacob have for Rachel? We get the impression here that he wasn't so much in love with her, that self-giving, selfless kind of love that God designed to be in the marriage relationship, but he was more in lust with her, if you know what I mean. He was trying to fill that emptiness, that need for love that he was missing from his family, that broken relationship with his father, that broken relationship with his twin brother, that lost relationship with his mother. And he was trying to fill that emptiness that he fell within through sex. Could it be that Jacob was trying to fill that need for love in that way? A lot of Hebrew scholars believe that's exactly what was going on in him. And we know what happens as we go on. After 7 years, they have a wedding. But the next morning, we're told in verse 25, "Behold, it was Leah." How many times do we seek after the things of this world, trying to fill that emptiness within us? The friendship, the alcohol, the seeking after wealth, that savings account, that relationship, hoping that it's going to fill us, but then when we wake up, we realize that those things just disappoint us. It wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. It didn't work. Now I'd like to turn your attention to Leah. Can you imagine how much she must have felt? Here she was finally married. But all of her life, she had lived in the shadow of this younger sister who was so much more beautiful than her. Whenever the men would come around, they would look right past Leah and their eyes would settle in on the beauty of her sister Rachel. Even her father thought she was unlovable, to the point where her father tricked another man into marrying her. She must not have been worth anything in the eyes of her father if he had to trick a man to marry her. And now, the next morning, her husband shuns her and immediately turns back to her dad and says, I'll work another 7 years so that I can have the hand of Rachel in marriage. Now look at verse 31. Follow along with me. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, in other words, Jacob rejected her, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore another son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son. And so she called his name Simeon. And again she conceived and was born a son, bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name shall be called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. And then she ceased bearing. Leah was empty. She felt as though her father didn't love her for who she was. She knew her husband had rejected her. She didn't feel like she compared to her brother, or to her sister, And so she too was seeking after love. She was hoping that by having a child that her husband might love her. So she named the first one Reuben, which means see a son. And she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. Now maybe after bearing him a son, his firstborn, that prized son, maybe now my husband's going to love me. He'll look upon me with favor. But it didn't work. And so she bore another son, and this time she named him Simeon, which means to be heard. And she said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son. Now maybe my husband will pay attention to me. Maybe now he will listen to me, because I bore him 2 sons, but it didn't work. And when she bore her 3rd son, she named him Levi, which means attached. And she says, maybe now, maybe finally my husband will love me. He'll feel a sense of attachment to me because I bore him 3 sons. 3rd time's a charm, right? But that didn't work either. You see, she was trying to fill that emptiness and that void in her life with the love of a husband. Someone that would look at her as first and foremost in his life. She was trying to fill that void with bearing a child, with hopes that maybe that child would love her. But that didn't work either. So once again, the romance solution disappointed. But then something changed. Did you notice that? Verse 35, she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. This time I'm going to look to the Lord to fill this emptiness inside of me. This time I'm going to look to the Creator rather than to the creation in order to fill me with that love that I was designed to feel and to give. And so she called him Judah. which means praise. Friends, some of you may have heard me say this, because I say it fairly often. As I've grown in ministry and grown to love the Lord more and been led by Him in His Word, I've come to understand that the Ten Commandments are not solely commands and rules that He wants us to follow. I'm starting to look at the Ten Commandments as 10 invitations. 10 ways that God says this is what love looks like, and I want to invite you into a loving relationship. I don't want you to look at the world for that love. I want you to listen to what I have to say about how this love works. It begins with me. And He says in the very first commandment, have no other gods before me. Let me be first and foremost in your life. Let me fill that need for love once and for all. Spend time with me. Honor my name. And let me be your all in all. And then, filled with that love, let that love pour out as you experience the blessings and the gifts and the abundant life that I have designed for you. And in the sixth commandment, when He says, thou shalt not commit adultery, He said, let me show you what it looks like to have a loving, godly relationship with your spouse. How you live. I want you to enjoy the marriage bed. I want you to enjoy that oneness that I have designed for you to have with your spouse, where the two shall become one flesh. I want you to live that way because that's what I've designed you for. You're designed for love. And when we fail, come to me. Let me offer you forgiveness. Make this relationship between you and me right again, and I will help you in your relationships with those around you. It's an invitation from our God not to look for love in all the wrong places, but to find fulfillment and joy and completeness in our relationship with our Creator. Do you want to know what that kind of relationship looks like? I'd like to show you a video. I'd like you to show you a video of what this deep, abiding love that God intends for us in this commandment.
I don't count it a burden, whatever, to have to care for her. I need to do everything. From the moment she gets up to the moment she goes to bed, I do absolutely everything. Clean her teeth, shower, dress, everything. But it's a privilege. I count it a great privilege to care for this one that I've loved all of these years and continue to love. This is the year when we'll celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. Our stories have been a lovely story. I first saw her when she was 8 years old, and her brother became my best friend. And we grew up together, and as we grew up, she was there. And I knew that she used to stare at me when I was playing footy with her brother and another friend, and when we used to ride bikes, and she kept staring at me, but I wasn't interested. I was 17, she was 16. I saw her dolled up, dressed up, and she had an A-line dress on, and boom, it was gone. She was the one for me then, absolutely. When we first started dating, I used to ride my bike from where I lived to where she was, and that was about 5 kilometers on a Saturday afternoon, because it was the only chance we had to get together. And it was hair wash day for her, and she used a special cream in her hair for a shampoo, and I can still smell it because that smell was so particular, so nice. It was just absolutely special. We had a bike. I used to ride everywhere on my bike, and then Glad had a bike as well, and we put a baby chair on the front of her bike, and so we carried our babies around on the bike with her as well. So yeah, bike's been part of our lives, and I guess that has something to do with us now. Around about 2004-05, I began to notice that there were things going wrong. She was finally diagnosed with the horrible disease of Alzheimer's. Having lived overseas, I knew that with a bike you can do lots of things. So I had a bike made, a bike chair made. We take it to the beach and ride along beside the beach. And as we do that, we see lots of people. A lot of people come talk to us because it's a unique thing. Nobody else has got a bike chair quite like that one. I am determined to care for her every need, every need. You see, God has loved us so unconditionally. And I understand that God has put His love in my heart. And because I realize how much God has loved me, that's how I too can love my lovely wife. She has done so much for me over all of these years. Now she can't, but I can, and I can return her love. And it's a love that, to me, means I can do everything for her. She's my princess, I'm her William, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Would you have it any other way? No, not at all. We love each other.